Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adoption Collection. I'm Allison, and today we have our special guests, Tessa, Paul, and Sharon here today, and they're going to share their story about how Tessa was adopted.
Okay, so basically my birth mom was about, I think, 17, and she was in a relationship, and she didn't get along with her father, and she didn't get along with her boyfriend's mom. And so when I was born, there wasn't a lot of support there. So she wanted to find another family for me to take care of me and to really be able to provide for me. And I think that was something that was kind of different because growing up, I got a lot of comments like, oh, you weren't wanted, or you weren't, and, it's not that. It was just that she couldn't provide for me and she wanted something else. I think that was kind of the priority of why she put me up for adoption.
I respect that and understand that because I, as a birth mother, that's the same reason that I placed my son. I was 20 years old, but I had already had a young daughter and knew that I wouldn't be able to provide for both and give them the opportunities that they both deserved. So I can understand from your birth mother's perspective on why she would do that, and I respect that.
Why did we choose adoption? I think is probably the question that's sort of most pertinent. And my wife and I had fertility issues, and after trying for, it wasn't that long, we just, said, this really isn't worth it to us, all the Herculean efforts to try to have a biological child. And so we very quickly went to explore adoption. And at the time, we were living in Massachusetts. And we decided to go international adoption because it was a very straightforward process to international adoption, whereas within Massachusetts for domestic adoption, there wasn't really an easy laid out system. There were a lot of places where you could be delayed, and it was also far more expensive than the international adoption. So after searching our souls, it was like, yeah, international adoption is really what we wanted to do. And so that's how we went forward.
And so, Tessa, which country were you born in?
I was born in Seoul, South Korea.
Very nice. Have you ever been back, or would you ever want to go back?
I have thought about going back. I definitely want to go back and try and find my birth mom. I think that would be cool, even if it doesn't work out how I perfectly want it to. I think that trying is better than not. And I also just want to see Korea because I think it's just such a great place. So,
yeah. I think that would be fun, even to just go and explore the culture.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the downsides of the international adoption is we know very little about her birth parents. And we don't even know if the story we have is accurate because we know that sometimes those stories aren't accurate. And there have been times in Tessa's life when she's really wanted to know more about her birth mom, been worried about her. And, we've almost searched a few times, but you always go to the experts to give that guidance. And we ended up waiting and, she can search when she's 18 and we'll support it. But, it is, I think, something that's left a little bit of a hole.
Yeah.
That, we'll pursue filling as time allows, as she gets older is what I mean.
I like that you're supportive of her if she chooses to, when she does turn 18, because I know not all parents would be okay with that. But we're your parents and we've raised you. So I appreciate the fact that you're willing to allow her that opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, she has two sets of parents. She has her birth parents. She has us. She may not know her birth parents, but they are still a huge part of her life. And one of our philosophies is that love is not a limited quantity. So, we have two children and we love both. We have pets and we love them. And, she has two parents. She can love them all. Or not two parents, two sets,
Right.
and she can love them all. I mean, I think, The more you love, the more you can love. So.
Let's see. So you mentioned talking about how like growing up kind of was a little different for me. So it was really interesting because most of my life has been really just like easy, you know, kind of nice, happy. But then there were some rough patches that I've gone through. So during elementary a lot, there were a lot of kids that just didn't understand how adoption worked. So again, they pointed out like, oh, you weren't wanted, or you were bought, or you know, all these things. You're the Asian Annie, and it was like, it was just that kind of like, no, there's more to it. And I got a couple of Asian kind of little bits of like, I would say a little bit of racism, just because they would point out like some features that were different from my parents. They, in fifth grade, some things got a little too like political, so they were saying like, well, if someone blah blah blah, I would be sent back to Korea, and it was just like, no. And so there was just that. So it was kind of hard for me in elementary to kind of handle that, because I found a lot of like being unwanted. So I struggled with like that. So, but kind of as I've grown up, it's kind of been a little bit more like,
That's what I was going to ask. So as you've gotten older, like now, do you feel that that's still there, or do you think it was just something because you were different than everyone else at first and they've now grown to accept it?
I think that as I've grown up, I've kind of gotten that extra layer of skin that's like, if they don't want to understand how it works and they don't really like want to be kind about that, then it's kind of like I can move on from that. And I kind of have found kind of my own kind of humor to it, because now that I think back of it, some of the things they said were just kind of so just random and kind of, I wouldn't say like stupid, but they didn't make sense. So I think that now that I've grown up, some of the things just don't really bother me anymore.
And we as parents have always been open to having Tess talk about her feelings and what she's going through, and recognizing that she does have to face racism, and that it can be hard for her. And so when she wants to talk, we're usually trying to be there to listen.
I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but I'm glad that you've at least figured out a way, like you said, to get a tougher layer of skin so it's not bothering you as much. I still wish it didn't happen though.
Yeah. But, part of me, I always look back at kind of my past, and some part of me is like, I'm always kind of thankful for that, because it also taught me how to direct it towards a positive outlook. Because if I hadn't gone through it, so much of other things would have been harder. And I think that, while it was hard, going through it was like, it helped in a sort of a way. If that makes sense.
You learned a lot of skills.
Yeah.
A lot of skills on how to deal with people and how to deal with difficult people that are valuable as we grow up. But it's never fun to have to learn them the hard way.
No, definitely not. When you were growing up, did you have friends that were adopted?
Yes. So I go to a camp every summer, except this summer because of COVID, but it's called Korean Heritage Camp, and it's put on by like heritage camps, and basically it's a ton of like Korean adoptees that just come together, and you spend a couple of days together. And I have a group of friends there who I'm really, really close to, and it's always something I look forward to, because they were kind of the first people that really understood kind of what I was going through too. And then I do have a couple other friends that are also adopted, that go to my school, and I think it's really nice to hear their stories, because I don't feel so alone. I have like a really close friend who has a different adoption story, but at the same time, we can both connect over kind of similarities, and we can both kind of express how that feels. So I think that's really nice.
I was going to add on, if I could, the heritage camps for adoptive families, and there are a whole bunch of different ones. A lot of them are for international adoptees, but they also have, I think, a couple for domestic adoptees as well. And they've been so wonderful in our kids' lives. It's a time, it's a weekend for us. We're in Colorado, where it's a weekend in the mountains in Colorado, that we get people from all over the country. When I think it's special for Tessa, it's when our family looks very normal, and no one ever rubbernecks to look at us. But it's also, you can spend time just with people who've gone through similar experience, and parents can too. And they have a lot of educational sessions about adoption, as well as cultural sessions. And it's just been hugely valuable.
It sounds like it, especially just being a heritage, everybody can relate on that aspect. So
Yes.
I like that. And I mean, just even if you stay in contact with these people outside of the camp, like you said, just having those people that you can go and talk to who also relate to maybe not your specific story, but can relate to what you've been going through in your life.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that's great about the camp too is that they bring in like hip hop artists from Korea and sports figures, and so there's a coolness to the Korean being Korean as opposed to just this alien place. And letting the kids connect up with that, I think is really, really good too.
Very nice. So it gives you something to look forward to aside from just seeing your friends.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So for Paul and Sharon, what do you think is, aside from having Tessa herself, what do you think is the greatest, what do you think is the greatest gift so far that you've received with adoption? Right. I just mean asides from her.
I mean, we have the good fortune to, have Tessa, to have children. We have, being, I don't know. I mean, what do you say? Being parents is a gift, and it's also extremely hard, but which you probably know too.
Yeah.
And but it's incredibly rewarding. So, I mean, I think the adoption is just one aspect of being a parent. So it's really, we have the ability to be parents because of adoption. That's, how do you put it?
I think one of the really beautiful things is that since Tessa is adopted, we're not necessarily looking for ourselves in her as far as, oh, you're like your grandmother, your grandfather. And so we get to watch her develop as who she is, as opposed to really trying to look for ourselves. And what is her story? What are her strengths? What is she passionate about? And that's just been really fun to watch.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Tessa, what are some of your passions?
I really like to do theater. Theater is definitely one of my biggest passions. I've been taking up some photography and just kind of being able to kind of capture things that are kind of not a once in a lifetime kind of thing, but kind of things that are beautiful and capturing that. And I like just kind of, being able to kind of express myself in kind of different ways that nobody kind of thinks of usually. So I kind of like that. So that's definitely two of my biggest passions, I would say.
And then Paul and Sharon, do you share those passions, or is this something she has uniquely picked up on her own?
We have always liked the arts, but we really try to be open with the kids. And we ended up with kids who love the arts. We tried sports with both of them, and we were ready. Neither of us watched the sports, but we were ready to go stand and cheer and all that. And neither of them liked it. So it's like, okay. So that we do have a lot in common in that respect. But I feel like a lot of it is just who she is. When she was like 3 or 4 years old, I remember holding her on my lap, and she was sobbing. And she said something like, I just want to be seen, or I just want to be on stage, or something like that. She loved performing from just this really, really young age. So that's what happened.
We always,
No, go ahead.
I had my theory was throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And so we went to a lot of different camps and a lot of different sporting things and just a lot of stuff. And there were times where, the kid would come home and was like, I don't like this. It's like, all right, we'll go do something else. And we saw that she very quickly migrated to performing and stage and singing. And it was always fun to watch her in performances because all of a sudden she would just bloom. And I would inevitably sit there going, where did this come from? Because I just didn't see it around the house. But once she was up in front of people, it was just like, wow. And that's been a real privilege to watch.
My primary job, I'm actually a high school theater director. So
cool.
we have a lot in common, Tessa. Yeah. So I love theater, musical theater. I've been on stage since I was 3. That's my thing. I now prefer to be behind the scenes on everything, but yeah, I love theater. It's my biggest passion.
I think my favorite part of theater is like the inclusiveness. Is almost everybody in theater you meet is open to just embracing you and being there, and I think that's one of my favorite things.
I agree. It's nice to be able to see people let their walls down and be open to whatever the experience is. I know it's not for everybody, but it's nice when you can actually let that go and just say whatever the dialogue is or sing the music and put everything you have into it.
Yeah.
For you, what is one thing that you would like adopted kids to know? Like if there was one bit of information that you could give to other kids, how would you help them?
I think I would tell them that you were wanted. Even though, it might have been kind of hard, you were wanted by some sort of parent or guardian figure. And while, sometimes it's hard to accept that, someone did have to give you up, it's also important to realize, I think, that there are 2 people that really love you and chose you for a reason.
I like that. And then going back, you said once you're 18, you would like to find your birth parents. On the offside chance that, you did have the wrong information, how would you go about that?
I think if my story was different, I would try and understand it, I think. I would try to understand what happened because I think that, it's always been kind of a question of who am I, kind of where did I come from, what was the backstory. So, there's always been that kind of like, well, this could have been what happened. There could have been other things that happened. So I think that definitely, I would, I think still getting out, kind of still understanding what went on, I think is important just because it's like, I like figuring those things out. So it's kind of, I think that, if that's the story that I have to kind of stay with, I'm fine with it. If I find out a new story, it's all good.
Would you be interested when you turn 18 to take like one of the 23andMe or Ancestry.com tests so that way you can see?
Yes. I have definitely kind of wanted to figure out those kind of roots and kind of see where it leads me.
Yeah.
So yes.
I haven't taken one personally, but through talking with all of these people and interviews, I realized that if you take a test and you're adopted, then they'll email the other people and say somebody new in your ancestry has been connected to you and linked to you. So it will link both parties. And yeah, so I've had a couple people say that they've met siblings that way.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be really cool. Yeah. If I can just add on,
absolutely.
When you asked about if her story was different, one thing I think with Tessa is she's just very resilient. And I think a lot of that's just inborn. I mean, there's stuff you can do as parents, but a lot is just personality too. But we're very fortunate there. So I feel like, it may be a setback for a while, but we just talk and process and you get through.
I think so.
Yeah.
I feel like you both are amazing parents. I just met you both. I mean, everybody has their trials and tribulations, but it seems that you're both very caring and nurturing to what she wants as a person and help mold her into who she wants, rather than saying, this is our daughter, these are our set rules, and you will abide by them. You're letting her grow and nourish into her own person.
Yeah, they definitely are.
That's our goal.
Yeah, that's what's important.
I agree, but I do know not all parents are like that, so it's refreshing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Of course. Tessa, is there any time in your life where you felt unique being adopted?
I think so. There were a couple times in elementary, especially, that I was one of the only kids who was Asian. And so, as much as that was a little bit like, oh, there's not a lot of diversity, it also felt special because it was like, ooh, I can kind of look into kind of my past and find things that, not everybody shares, because, there'd be projects where we have to, kind of talk about, our families and our family trees. And of course, I don't know all of it, but then when I would look back, most of the kids in my class would have like kind of similar stories, but I had kind of the only different story, and I thought that was kind of cool. So I definitely think that there was a unique side to being adopted.
For your family trees, did you ever put your biological family tree, or did you just say what your parents, like your mom and dad's parent?
It was always kind of odd because we didn't do like a family like tree kind of projects.
Okay.
We kind of did more like we would kind of talk about kind of our family and just kind of things about that, especially kind of kindergarten, first grade. So when I would talk about it, I would kind of explain my adoption story and then add in my parents. So I think that it was kind of cool because I kind of did kind of like a merging thing, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you had one. It was a family tree-ish type of thing.
Yeah.
But her birth parents were on there too, I think.
Yeah.
We sort of talked about a grafted tree,
Yeah.
putting a new branch on an existing tree.
Yeah, but her school was very arts-oriented and flexible, so they were not rigid to, like, I've heard stories about family tree projects and how problematic they can be for some kids, and we didn't run into that.
Yeah, my son, who I have an open adoption with, we're very close, but it was interesting for me the first time his mom called and said, Ryan's doing a family tree project, can I have your family history? And to me, I was like, you want my history? But you're his parents. And she's like, well, but it's a biological tree. And I was just thrown off because to me, I had never thought that they would ask my information. So I happily gave it, or like my family is German and Brazilian. And so she's like, I know you're Brazilian, but what else are you? He has to do a flag on what is nationality. And I was like, okay, sure. And I happily gave it to him, but like, I would have done yours, but that was just me. So that's why I was interested to see what you picked.
Well, and I think with transracial adoption, unlike, we can't hide the adoption. If we go out as a family, no one's going to assume that Tessa's our biological child. If one of us goes out, it sometimes can happen, but not if all of us are here. So, I think that brings a different perspective to adoption than if, adoption, if the adoptive parents and the adopted child look similar or could have the same heritage. So.
Right. And then, Tessa, you said you were born in South Korea?
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider, like, if people were to ask you, do you say you're American or do you say you're South Korean?
I haven't, I don't get asked that question.
Okay.
I typically like to say I'm Korean American. I like to involve both parties and just kind of accept both. When people kind of, make kind of comments about it, I say, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, but I also recognize that I'm Korean as well, and I don't want to give that up. So I think that I definitely still go by Korean American.
I like that answer better than the ones I get. I like that you're willing to accept both sides. And like you said, not give up who you are.
Yeah.
But I've also heard, I think you and your brother talk about Asian and American. And when they use the word American in those sorts of conversations, they mean a white American. And I think it's sad, but I think it reflects our culture, which right now is very relevant. And I think people are finally waking up to that fact that we have this norm in the culture that to be American means to be white. And that's, of course, absurd. Right. But, it's something that I don't know what I want to say, and we need to address. Yeah. But I've seen it just in how you speak sometimes, if that makes sense.
I think so.
Yeah.
Are there any things that, Paul or Sharon, that you would give, like any advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about adopting internationally?
I can't, because the landscape has changed so much.
I think one of the things is, for me, is prepare yourself for ignorant comments and really think them through. I mean, some of the things when the kids were littler, how much did you pay for them? So you're not really parents. And there are just a lot of kind of ignorant things that get said to you as a parent. And particularly when your child is sitting there, you really need to come back with something that affirms them.
Yes.
And to be able to talk to the child later and say, this is not your fault, this is not my fault, it's the person there who's displaying their own ignorance.
Yes.
And don't take these negative messages on yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, we've even had not many, but a few experiences of direct racial slurs against our children when they were very young, and so being prepared to address that as well.
And you think it through. And the other thing, as an adopted parent, I mean, there are a lot of books on being a transracial parent. Just read everything you can. I mean, you're not going to agree with everything, and you don't have to, but you need to at least think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to go through the racial slurs, and hopefully it bonded you together even more rather than putting ties in between, because ultimately you are her parents and you are the ones raising her. So I wish you didn't have to go through that.
One of the good things that came out of it is that Tessa and our son also got to see that we're willing to stand up for them. If someone says something inappropriate to them, we're not going to just go, it's not important. No, this is important, and we're going to speak up, and we're going to challenge it. And that, I think, is a real affirmation to them.
Has it gotten easier for you as Tessa and her brother grew older?
Well, what really helped was where we lived at first, which was before Tessa came home. It was an environment that was much less accepting, and we chose where we live pretty specifically. Tessa ended up in a different elementary school. She mentioned she was like the only Asian kid, and that was mostly because it was the right one for her brother, and we ended up not going to our local school for her. But she's back in the local schools now, and they're much better. Not that you don't run into things, but they're better. Yeah. And I think wherever you are, things can come up. Yeah. But,
right.
And I think you get more and more prepared for the ignorance, so that the first time it happens, you're sitting there going, "What did you just say to me?"
Yeah.
Whereas now it's if it happens, which it doesn't happen very often, but when it happens, you kind of roll your eyes, you say something directly back to them, and you just move on, but you address it.
Yeah.
But you get practice with it over time.
Tessa, has it gotten easier for you over time? I know you said that second layer of skin, but I know words can still hurt.
Yes, words can definitely still hurt. And, you know, there are times, even in high school, where I'm like, ooh, that kind of stung. But, you know, now that, you know, I've actually met more people, more kind of, I don't know how to put it, but there's a few more kids in my grade that are adopted. There are far more diversity. And I think that it's, you know, easier to kind of adapt and kind of ignore because, you know, people don't tend to say it as much because they, you know, they've grown up, I guess, if that's kind of. So I think there's still some things that people say that are not the most easiest thing to take, but I also think that it has gotten easier.
If people were to ask, I mean, obviously you're not just about adoption, you are a person, but if people were to ask about adoption, would you try and educate them on your journey, or is that something that you keep private to yourself? I know you're doing this interview, but if like one of your friends were to ask.
I think I try to explain it kind of from the first get-go. I think when I normally meet someone, one of the first things I say, you know, is I'm adopted. And, you know, I try to tell them kind of what happened, because a lot of assumptions I get is just immediately so your parents didn't want you. And, you know, that's just a question that I think comes up naturally because they just want to understand. So I think by me kind of trying to explain what it's kind of about, I think is what I try to do, just because it's like, I think that there's more to adoption than what a lot of people think. So I think that, yeah, I definitely try to at least explain my story and explain that adoption is not so rigid on kind of that thought. So, yeah.
You said one of the first things you tell people is that you're adopted. Why did you choose to do that?
I think because, you know, sooner or later, you know, if they meet both parents, they're going to know, you know, and I think that, you know, being adopted is kind of one of the things I actually take pride in, you know, and I kind of just want to be like, well, this is, you know, how it is, you know, this is a part of me. So, you know, get to know me, you know, so that's kind of what I do. So okay. I do like including that part.
Very nice. I just didn't know if it, I mean, obviously you're proud of your heritage. You go to these camps, you're
yeah.
proud of who you are. I just wasn't, some people don't like to share that they're adopted unless they meet parents or. And
there are some people that I tend to not like, you know, if it's, you know, you know, there are times where I don't mention it. There are times where I just decide, now it's not the time, you know, I'll explain later. Or if someone is just not comprehending, I'm like, you know, it isn't worth it to really explain it if they're not going to listen. So I think there are some times where it's like, I'll wait, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Does it become like the word is litmus test, so kind of like a test of who's going to become a friend versus who's just going to become someone you know?
Well, I think that, you know, one of the ways I kind of dealt with like a lot of like pressure, and not pressure, but like kind of comments where I would make kind of a joke out of it first, so that it was kind of like, you can't make a comment and hurt me because I already made it. So, you know, sometimes I'll put in a little joke, but it's not like my parents didn't want me. I don't kind of joke about that. It's more just kind of about little things that, you know, I haven't joked about it for a little while, but you know, I try to kind of get there before other people do, I guess, so that it's kind of like, you can't hurt me, like, you know. I think so. So I think it is a little bit of kind of not a test, but kind of as a way to say, you know, I need you to understand that there's a little bit more sensitivity towards that thing, so that if, you know, if you're wondering about like family, or we're talking about families, that there's not that kind of block that people get stuck into, because
Right.
some people, that I have made friends with, they don't understand, and so it's kind of like, ooh, and then and they usually kind of get some sort of kind of edge with me, and you never know why somebody has an edge with you sometimes, but there are some people that for some odd reason they just weren't really kind of aware of what adoption was like, so yes, so
So you have some strategy going into it, but like you said, it's not a test per se.
yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining. I greatly appreciate hearing all different sides of the story. Tessa, I think you are incredibly strong, and I hope you realize that, both of your parents said that, but one, it takes a lot to be able to talk to a stranger and tell your story, but it seems that you have had a lot of diversity and growing up being adopted and being Asian, and it doesn't sound like it was the easiest for you, but you seem to have a smile on your face and take it for face value. So I just want to say thank you, and I am proud of you, even though I just met you.
Thank you so much for reaching out and letting me have this opportunity.
Of course. Thank you for sharing. And, thank you both, Paul, Sharon, for, giving your input. And it sounds like you haven't had it the easiest either with the racial slurs and remarks, but it sounds like, like I said earlier, you're wonderful parents and taking care of her. And so thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I ever asked how old you were when you were adopted.
Yeah, so I was 7 months old. So I spent some time, I think, with a foster family, and that's where most of my photos are from. And then I was adopted 7 months later, or in April of the next year.
Cool.
So, yeah.
All right. So then, do you just want to share about your other name?
Sure. So I was given the name Sumi as my name from my birth mother, and from the description and kind of the definition, it means, I think, outstanding, beautiful, and so that has really kind of stayed with me, because there have been a lot of times like in my life where I've had a little like self-esteem problems, and I think just having that kind of name just as a reminder really like was like, that's nice. So I think that it's been a nice reminder throughout my life that, you are beautiful, and, don't let anyone get you down. So I think that's been really important.
I think for your mom, your birth mother, to spend time thinking about a name, I think it does mean, or does show how much she really did care about you.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. We also celebrate kind of like a gotcha day, kind of every year. It's usually in April. And it's kind of the day I came home basically from Korea. And I really like that because, people have like, sometimes have like the half birthdays. And for me, I never really thought of like a half birthday, because I've always had kind of this gotcha day that's, really special. And, there's like no presents, but, we usually go out to dinner, or we just spend extra time together. And I think that's really special, because it's like, coming together and kind of going, yes, you had your birthday, but you also have this really incredible day. So that's another thing that's really cool.
Yeah, and then it gives your parents a day to,
Yeah.
the day they received you, but it's something that you can always celebrate together and remember that special moment in their lives, because you were too young to remember. But
yeah,
that's so fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for including
of course.
my family.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a good rest of your day.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.